Welcome back, Simian Squad, to another episode of Neckbeard Stories. I'm your host, Mr. Sean, and remember, if you like my content, help YouTube see that I'm an okay guy by clicking like, subscribing, and leaving a comment. And with that being said, let's begin. Our first story today comes from Nishimoto and is called Thought the RPG Club Would Be Nerdy Fun, Got Low-Beard Drama Instead. Hello. This story is actually written in Brazilian Portuguese, but I thought this place was perfect for posting it, so I'm sorry for any spelling mistakes. Important information, I'm in high school. Everyone in this story is 17 plus, and even though I identify as a guy, the people in the story will refer to me as a girl. Maybe not out of malice, but because I haven't come out to them. Later on, it will be obvious why they don't know. Alright, let's get into it. Recently, I moved from one state to another, and now I go to full-time school. At the end of Friday, my school has the famous clubs, where students go to the clubs they chose. Since I arrived a bit late in the school year, I didn't get to choose a really cool club, like music since I play the violin, and later felt more connected to the people there, or the crochet club, which seemed nice to relax on a Friday afternoon. So I ended up being assigned to the RPG club. Wow, they can just assign you to play, Dungeons and Dragons in Brazil. That's kind of cool. Or bad, depending on how you feel about Dungeons and Dragons. Friday was my first day at school, so the first people I met were them. The club's DM was a tall guy who is exactly the low-beard type, stereotype. On top of that, he had a speech impediment, and because he's autistic, everything that's going to happen in this story will be softened by that ridiculous excuse. He had a more serious speech issue. I couldn't understand anything he said, which is a real problem when your role in RPG is to guide the story. So okay, several people in the RPG group were awful, especially one guy who had long hair at the time. He's cut it since, and surprisingly become a better person. Alright, weird correlation, but whatevs. On the first day, he asked if I was a boy or a girl, because my hair is very short. For context, I shaved it on January 1st, so it's still pretty short. And when I said I was a girl, they started making stupid jokes about how I needed to prove it. Ugh, ick. I didn't get it at first, until one of them pointed at my chest and I showed the strap on my bra. Turns out, what they really wanted was to grope my chest. Ew. I was like, ugh, but tried to play along, saying that the bra already proved it. And then they started making jokes about a trans girl from another grade, who I later met and found out she's an absolute sweetheart. Her hair is long, she has a very feminine voice, wears long nails, etc. And even so, in that situation, they insisted on calling her really derogatory names. They used a term for her that could be translated as the N-word for trans people. I left there on the first day thinking, wow, that was awful. Thank God, this is just a trial class. Exactly 2 days passed. Not 2 weeks, not 2 months, 2 days. And the RPG club leader started sending me some weird messages. You know, when your friend has a crush on a girl and doesn't know how to message her, so you basically have to steer the boat while he just watches? It was that kind of vibe, but super obvious. He said I smelled like fresh vanilla. Again, ick. I thanked him and said I wore vanilla perfume, and then he started talking about how beautiful my hair was, asked for pictures of it when it was longer, complimented every feature of mine possible, and I just thanked him, especially bracing for the headache I'd have the following week. On Monday, I ended up speaking with school administration about the club, the jokes about the girl, and the fact that they basically harassed me. I asked to be moved to another club. Turns out, I couldn't. I tried to explain and make it clear that it wasn't just I didn't like the people, is that they were openly being transphobic and harassing me for being the only person, seen as female, in the environment. The administration just said, okay, I'll talk to them, and nothing happened. Later, I found out it's because the coordinator's nephew and son are in the club, and with the son being the vice leader. A few minutes after leaving the office, 2 members called me aside to talk and told me that Lowbeard Supreme had a crush on me. My reaction was to blink and say, what? He asked me out a few minutes later, and I turned him down because I had to travel that day. This happened last week, so that's it for now. I'll post updates. Now, guys, this was written and posted a month ago. There have been no updates, so something tells me we're not getting any. If that changes, I will, of course, do an update here on the channel, but I feel like, the OP just needs to find a way to distance herself from this group, himself from this group. And again, the story got me. OP did state in the beginning that they identify as male, but all the pronouns and everything used in the story were female for obvious reasons. Again, I can't even imagine what the club would do if they found out you were a trans guy. Clearly they are transphobic, but considering which transition you made and what parts you have, I can't even imagine what they might try. Now, the thing is that, yes, there is nepotism involved in this, and you definitely want to get out of there. I would try going above this coordinator because, again, nepotism's involved. These people could potentially be dangerous. You are biologically female in a group full of just awful people who use their neurodivergence as an excuse for how they behave. You want no part of this. You need to get yourself out, get yourself safe. That's my thoughts on this story. Also, this might just be a translation error, but what is a low beard? Is that just a weird Brazilian Portuguese translation from neckbeard? I don't know. Moving on. Our next story comes from Master Influence 509 and is entitled, "The Neckbeard Befriended Me Over His Weird Racial Hierarchy." In my time at university, I had the bad luck of running into several incel neckbeard-style creeps, but this incident was the most bizarre one by a mile. TLDR at the end. Sometime in my second year, I was approached by this talkative Indian guy at the bus stop. I do have to specify his race because, as you probably guessed from the title, it will play a big part in the BS that's about to happen. This guy, who I'll just refer to as Guy for the rest of the story, was just looking for directions, but we started chatting and hit it off almost immediately. It turned out Guy was also a student at my uni, so we started hanging out a lot after that, and became close friends. Looking back, there were a few red flags, right from the get-go, but I didn't register them at the time. Every time we'd meet, Guy would ask me some variation of, "Where are the girls?" When I say every time, I mean every time, we'd bump into each other in public at random. "Where are the girls?" He invites me to his flat, and I turn up. "Where are the girls?" You get the idea. I just passed it off as an odd but harmless personality quirk because besides this repetitive question of his, he was always super chill and friendly. Red flag number 2. Happened when I tried to introduce Guy to a friendship group of mine that lived in the same accommodation as him. A few weeks after it happened, my friends said they had to speak in private with Guy to resolve something going on between him and somebody else they knew. They told me it was private stuff and that they had resolved it, so I didn't bother prying further. But it was worth noting that after that, every time I asked Guy if he wanted to hang out with me and my other friends, he'd be very reluctant, or to be more specific, he'd say he didn't want my friends because they were guys, and he wanted girls. After a few solid months of friendship, Guy began to have a little bit of a punctuality problem. Whenever we arranged to hang out, he'd never turn up and proceed to ignore all my messages asking where he was. I'd usually find out his excuse in a few days. There was also this one awful incident where I was 10 minutes late to meeting him at his accommodation, something I had already told him about by text, so he blew me off completely. Text messages, social media, phone calls, none of them got a response. I just sat in the reception area catching up on shows I missed, and 3 hours later, Guy arrives. Man, why did you wait so long, OP? Jesus. And the first thing he said after seeing me isn't, "Hi." It isn't, "Sorry." Yep, you guessed it. This man didn't just expect me to be surrounded by a harem of girls 24/7. He expected these girls to wait 3 hours for a total stranger they had never met before. As for his excuse why he wasn't home, because I was running late and he figured he should go help another one of his friends study. He was browsing Snapchat the whole time while saying this, so I knew damn well he saw all my messages and chose to ignore them. At that point I figured it was time to tone down the friendship a little. I really enjoyed hanging out with Guy, but that clearly wasn't going to happen anymore, so why bother? I didn't block him or cut contact or anything. but I did stop arranging to meet up with him and talking with him as much on social media. Fast forward a few more months, and I had completely forgotten Guy existed, until by sheer coincidence, he crossed paths with me and two of my other friends, an Arab boy and a white girl.
Hey, where are the white women at?
Guy told me he wanted to meet up with me and these two friends, and he went into overdrive planning this dinner at a restaurant out. I told him straight up I'm not playing around anymore. If he wants to keep our friendship, he'd have to stick to his damn word and actually show up at this dinner of his. He promised me he will, and my two friends said they were chill with coming along, so we had ourselves a plan. Guy seemed to understand how much of a dick he'd been in the past because he texted me at frequent intervals to keep confirming details about the dinner. Maybe a bit too frequent. Every day we'd go over the time, the place, and what to do if we were running late, and whether my two friends were still good to come along. Okay, that last one was a lie. He'd specifically asked me about the white girl.
Hey, where are the white women at?
Who I'll refer to as WG from now on. Eventually, it came. The day of the dinner. Technically. I was woken up at 3 a.m. by a phone call from Guy. Given the time, I was worried it could be something serious and immediately asked him if he was okay. He didn't acknowledge my question, instead asking me again if WG was coming to the dinner.
Hey, where are the white women at?
I remember letting out a nervous chuckle and telling him that while it's good he cares about punctuality now, this is getting a little too much. But Guy wasn't done. He told me he had a plan. After dinner was over, I was to push WG to go with Guy to a second dinner where it would be just them alone. When I asked him to elaborate what he meant by push, Guy told me to persuade her at all costs to comply. According to him, since I was her friend, she would listen to me and go on a date with him. Yep, you heard that right. Guy wanted me to ask out a girl on his behalf. WG had just come out of a pretty nasty breakup and wasn't in the mood for a relationship. Something I told Guy straight away, but he was just like, we must still try. He pulled some emotional manipulation bullcrap like, I think of you as a brother. Do you do the same to me? But it was 3 a.m. and I was not in the mood, so I just muted my phone and cut the call. After I had gotten some sleep, I told my friends about the shit Guy was trying to pull, and we switched plans to have dinner elsewhere with just the three of us. My two friends have a good laugh at the comically disgusting way Guy was texting about them, treating the boy like he didn't exist and WG like she was an object, without her own agency. And I had a laugh too, because Guy was texting me and calling me non-stop. I will admit, I was a petty bee and continued to air him for a while just to get back at him for those 3 hours he made me wait. After a week of airing, though which Guy would not stop trying to get through to me, I broke the silence. I told him he's an effing moron for thinking that another guy can ask out a girl on his behalf, and a terrible friend on top of that. I also gave him some tips on how to ask out a girl in hope that he'll use them. It's at this point the truth gets revealed. Guy never wanted to be friends with me because he liked me as a person. He wanted to be friends with me because I am a muscular white guy, and he had a thing for white girls.
Hey, where are the white women at?
According to his twisted logic, if he was friends with me, I would act like a beacon of sorts and would get him attention from girls of my skin color. I am beyond disgusted and block him on everything, and since I don't want him creeping on other girls or being a dick to the other guys just because of something as superficial as effing race, I posted a warning about him on my Instagram story. It's then that someone from the first group of friends I mentioned reached out to me. You know, the one that had to resolve a private issue with Guy. It turns out this issue involved Guy trying to corner a white girl at social events and stroke her hands without her permission. Yikes. So what ended up happening to Guy? Thankfully he was graduating soon after that year and I never saw him again. But he wouldn't stop being a nuisance while he could. He knew I went home at summer break while WG was an international student who stayed on campus, and he waited until then to start obsessively stalking her. Despite her running away and proving she wasn't interested multiple times, he kept doing it until I faked returning to campus, which shut down his cowardly ass immediately. TLDR, Guy befriends me because he thinks that as a white guy, I will attract him some white girls, and he does not take any effing hints. Look, I am no Lothario. I am no expert on how to woo a female, but the one thing, and I guess it was kind of a low percentage strategy, but it did end up essentially working for me, was always just live your life, do the things you enjoy, and eventually you will meet compatible people because they will also be doing the things that you enjoy because that's how you'll meet them. And I met my wife playing Dungeons and Dragons, but it's always my friends who, I guess looking back, did go on a lot more dates than I did, albeit the relationships rarely lasted very long. They always had a plan. They always had a strategy, and it was just like, why don't you just try enjoying your life and maybe something will come along? Like, even if it doesn't, you're still just enjoying your life. And it sounds like Guy could really use that method as opposed to this strategy of, I'm going to position myself to meet as many white girls as possible by having good-looking white male friends and then stalking women. Not cool, dude. Not okay, my guy. Guys, I hope you're enjoying these stories. It is my pleasure to read them for you. But again, we are really trying to get the views and the numbers and the subs and all that up on the channel. We're trying to go for 100,000 views for the year. We're trying to get 2,000 total subscribers. Or we're also just trying to get 20 combined members and patrons. We're kind of floundering in that, but if you guys like this stuff, please consider subscribing, sharing the videos with your friends. Maybe even consider becoming a member of Patreon. Tiers start at just $1 a month. So can't do this without you guys. So I thank you for your continued support. Let's get back into the stories. Story number 3 today comes from LeastAd9741, and it's entitled, I Had to Abandon a Friend Who Became a Neckbeard. I'm writing this story because a lot has happened over the past month or so, and I need to get it off my chest. TLDR at the end, trigger warnings, mentions of SA, transphobia, and general creepiness. Oh boy, alright. Buckle your seatbelts, guys. Let's get into this one. So this one friend group of mine had a guy who was, not the most ordinary person, let's say. For the sake of the story, let's call him Johnny. Johnny is on the spectrum, and he was clearly struggling with a lot of things behind the scenes. Like every time he lost a round of his favorite gun game, he'd punch his desk till his hands were bleeding, even if it was a casual game mode. He also had a pretty bad self-esteem issues, calling me an alpha because I like gym and martial arts, and calling himself a low-value male because he didn't. All of this done completely unironically, by the way. But despite me offering to take him to the gym or a Muay Thai taster session multiple times, he refused. He also didn't want to seek professional help about the whole desk punching thing because in his eyes that would make him weak. The entire friend group desperately wanted to help Johnny, and we'd spend a lot of time supporting him in whatever way we could. One of the people in this group, let's call her Goose, even had the idea to make a separate chat where the rest of the friend group would talk in private about the best ways to aid this guy's mental health. But as you could probably guess from the title of this post, things didn't go exactly as planned. Another dilemma Johnny had with his life was that he had a crush on this girl, but he was too afraid to ask her out. All things considered, he'd lucked out pretty well because this girl was, 1, in his class, and 2, went to the same societies as him, and 3, was confirmed to play the same video games as him. There were a lot of ways he could have gone about this. All he had to do was take the initiative. Night after night, Johnny would ask us for help in the voice chat, and we'd spend ages suggesting him different ways he could start a conversation with her. And the reason I say night after night was because no matter how much advice he was given, he'd never actually do it. We would hand him a fully scripted convo shaped by every single "what should I do?" question he threw at us, and nothing would come of it. What he did do, however, was begin to stalk her. Oof. He found a photo of her from secondary school on Google, and would proudly tell us about how he had it saved on his phone as his PC wallpaper, etc., etc. Obviously, we told him to get rid of it, which he would always respond with a bunch of "why?" We were lenient on him because of the aforementioned mental health and autism, and calmly explained to him that it would be seen as creepy for him to have a photo of a person he hadn't even spoken to, even if he did get it from a Google search anyone could do. Every time he'd say he understood and tell us he'd deleted it, only for him to reveal a while later he still had it. Even sent it to the group chat at one point, and it took a whole ass debate for him to unsend it. To my knowledge, he still has the photo downloaded. Johnny would also start saying gross things at random like, "I have a big booger," I haven't showered in 2 weeks. And my balls are crusty. Actual unaltered quotes, by the way. At first we thought he was just trying to troll us, but when we asked him if he was after he said the booger thing, he sent us a photo of his nose gold rather than giving us a simple no. Looking back at it, thank F we didn't ask him if he was trolling after he talked about his balls. I told him that I didn't think his crush would like a dude who doesn't shower and talked about his boogers, to which he replies, "Well, what if she's into that stuff?"
Joke's on you, I'm into that shit!
At this point, red flags are starting to show, and the friend group gets a bit more confrontational. We tell him to stop with this stuff and fix up his act, but he always dodges with either more "why?" questions, usually about stuff that we explained to him several times already, or spouting random WW2 trivia since he's obsessed with that stuff. Oh boy, that's always a good sign in an autistic person. We keep letting him know his behavior is disgusting and start teasing him about it, calling him a creep and saying stuff like, "Ugh, I miss Johnny. It's a shame John had to take over his body and turn him into a gooner." Or whatever. But things only got worse. Later on, Johnny tries to justify R. No, I didn't skip anything between the last paragraph, and this one, it was completely out of nowhere and still has the whole friend group kinda shook. He puts on this weird-ass young Sheldon, interesting, kind of act as he deliberates the morality of whether or not he should R his crush. When we tell him R is bad, yep, you guessed it, he does his why routine all over again, except it's 200 times more sickening given the subject matter. He says the most messed up things, like when I tell him he has to respect her feelings, he says, "Respect is something to be earned." Eventually me and another guy in the group have to threaten to R him if he R's the girl, which shuts him up immediately. That's a little left up, OP, alright? I mean, I get where you came from a good place, but still, ugh. After that, I tell the others that I'm done with Johnny. I had hoped he'd be able to become a better person, but it's safe to say my hope was misplaced. They're pretty much on the same page as me, but decide to give him one final chance since he was a longtime friend of theirs. I change my mind and decide to go along with the rest of my friends, albeit very cautiously. And to my surprise, Johnny actually shows signs of changing. He admits it's okay to not be okay. He takes Goose's advice to make a spreadsheet to chart his mental health, and he starts showering regularly. Only for him to revert back to his previous vile behavior when we least expected it. I'm done being nice. I tell him straight up that he's a waste of space who doesn't care to learn, and he's turning his entire friend group against him. He says that he learns many things, to which I recount the whole R debate incident, but because I said the name of the girl, he ignores my entire message and just goes, "Oh my god, insert name of girl mentioned," before proceeding to spam the chat with her name. I tell him one final time that he's losing his friends with his own actions, to which he responds, What am I losing to you?" I leave the chat and block Johnny on everything. A few days later, everyone else takes a page out of my book and cuts contact with that creep. Even Goose, who was the most lenient with him and was trying the hardest to help. And that's because Goose is a trans woman, and Johnny refused to respect her identity. To make things worse, Goose and Johnny are longtime friends of around 10 years, and she'd been out as trans for 3 years, but he still tells her how she's not a real woman and refuses to budge. According to him, if men and women were something decided by choice, then the rules of society would collapse. Which is effing ironic coming from the R justifier. As of now, the chat that was meant to help Johnny is our main group chat, and the only time he's ever mentioned is when someone pokes fun at his god-awful behavior. We're considering warning the girl that he's stalking about him, but none of us have her contacts, and given how much of a coward he is, it's unlikely he'll do anything. TLDR, friend randomly becomes a total creep, tries to justify R, and acts transphobic against longtime friend trying to help him. Update: I've alerted the school about him. I mean, honestly, OP, that update is everything, because I was going to say, you need to try and find a way to contact this person to let her know what he is potentially planning, because he's lost his friend group. He's got nothing to essentially to lose now. Like you've isolated him, which rightly so. You don't need to put up with that. You don't need to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. But again, I feel like, if you were to have done nothing, that would be on you partially if something happens. Mostly on him, but you did nothing to prevent it, knowing he was a danger, which, not a good way to be, but you alerted somebody. I don't know how helpful the school's going to be, but at least it's something. So a little bit of my own personal experience is, I have ADHD. I used to have behavioral anger issues that mellowed out with puberty as my hormones regulated. And I was diagnosed as having, how exactly did they, Asperger's-like tendencies. Like, I'm not on the spectrum, but like, I can see the spectrum. I can wave at the spectrum, but I'm not actually on the spectrum, which is interesting. Like, it feels like, I don't know. But, what do I know? I'm not a doctor. But the thing is that none of that growing up was ever an excuse. And it sickens me that people use their neurodivergence as an excuse for bad behavior. Like, people tell me I have no filter, but the truth is I have a filter. I know when something is the wrong thing to say. I simply enjoy saying things that, technically would be something a person with no filter would say, but I have no one to blame but myself. I make the conscious choice to say these things. I'm also currently unmedicated and have been for over 10 years, and while this is not a good option for everybody, it's something that I worked really hard to make work for myself, and at the end of the day, you have to make it work, whether that's on medication, off medication. You can't just use your neurodivergence as a crutch. You have to be an actual, honest-to-God human being, and it sounds like Johnny just wasn't willing to do that. So you were right to leave, and you were right to alert people about the creep. And guys, we're getting a little close to the 30-minute mark, so I think we're going to call it a day. Just so you know, please again, like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a member, consider becoming a Patreon, consider going to eBay, Mercari, buying a mini, also Drive-Thru RPG, The Withering Rhyme should be out later this week. I have a video ready to go that I'm going to post as soon as it's available. So, with all that being said, guys, I'm Mr. Sean. This is Mr. Sean Productions, and I sincerely hope that you alpha great day and an even beta tomorrow. Bye-bye.